Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Not the Day Job Pod. Because our What's Good episode went a little over time, we decided to bring you, as promised, the main topic we kind of wanted to discuss in a separate episode. So, came to our main topic we were going to talk about was podcasting, why we got into podcasting, how we came to having our own podcast, and kind of what podcast inspired us to do this. So, Jacob, when did you first start listening to podcasts that you remember?
I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. Before we moved out to Portland, I met Corey's father-in-law, Chris. We went to a Thai food restaurant after a get-together, and we were just talking about Star Wars because he's a big Star Wars fan. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and he told me about this podcast, Star Wars Minute, that he listens to. And what this podcast is they literally go through each and every individual minute of Star Wars and talk about every minute of Star Wars, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and everything like that. So that was the first podcast I started listening to, and that got me into various of other podcasts.
And I remember when you started and they've been around for a while. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Long time.
6 years?
They're in their 7th season right now. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're on The Force Awakens?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've gone through the prequels.
They started with the original trilogy, went to the prequels, and now they just started Force Awakens. They're like 40 minutes into Force Awakens.
And even though that they're taking minute by minute, it's still a 30 minute episode.
Yeah, their earlier episodes were
shorter,
probably 10 to 20 minutes long, but now they're half hour or better after they kind of got a rhythm and got good chemistry between themselves, and they have different guests for every 5-minute chunk of time. Yeah.
So I remember when you first started listening to them, because you used to blow through them. You were listening to them all the time, all day long.
Oh yeah.
You blew through it pretty quick.
I got caught up within a month or so. But I mean, I listen to it while I'm working.
Yeah.
Which, that's a really big, a saving grace and pastime for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Corey, when did you kind of first start listening to podcasts?
It was pretty recently. I'd say within probably less than a year ago. Really? I started listening. Yeah. I think the first one were just they weren't even real podcasts, really. I wouldn't call them podcasts. They're more radio shows. Mm-hmm. But actual podcasts, I'm really into sports and mostly basketball. So I found that listening to sports podcasts, basketball podcasts was really cool. And also I had a job that allowed me to do it. Mm-hmm. I work alone. I don't work with anybody else any of the time. So it's a nice way to make the day go by a little quicker.
Yeah.
Just listen to a podcast. But my last job, I couldn't really do that because I was always working with someone, and you kind of needed to hear what they were saying or,
mm-hmm.
communicate more. But are we going through the ones we like right now, or are we waiting on that?
We'll save that for the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So within the year, not even a year, I've been listening to podcasts, but.
Yeah, I think I probably started a year and a half ago, and I only know that because that's how long I've been at my current job. And it was kind of like you, Corey. There's no customer service side of it. I'm by myself, sometimes driving, maybe up to 8 hours or sometimes 10 hours in a day round trip. So yeah, it's just a lot of alone time, a lot of drive time where I have the opportunity to listen to podcasts and just, I can blow through quite a few of them. So, Jacob, you said you had Star Wars Minute.
Yep.
And then did Star Wars Minute kind of turn you on to the idea of starting your own podcast, or how did you get to the point where you said, you know what, I want to do that?
The thing I liked most about what Star Wars Minute was all about is it was kind of a platform for people to talk about, obviously Star Wars, but podcasting itself, I felt, was a really neat, unique avenue for people to just kind of express things that they're interested in. Kind of like YouTube, we have people who are very specific. They zero in on a very specific part of fandom to talk about, and that's what their channel is all about. But, there are a lot of podcasts that are the same way. But I thought it was neat because what Pete and Alex do, they're the hosts of Star Wars Minute. They would bring on new guests every week.
Isn't Pete the retailer from Portland too?
No, Alex right now
Alex.
Alex Robinson, he's a comic book artist. He lives in Portland here. Pete lives in New York, and actually that's where they met, was in New York. But anyway, what they do is they have new guests every week, and they cover 5 minutes of Star Wars. And more times than not, these other guests are from different podcasts. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of plug what podcast they're from, and not all of them are specifically Star Wars podcasts. They're either movie review podcasts or any other area of fandom. And I just think that kind of opened up my eyes to the whole podcasting realm. It's another platform for people to be expressive and passionate about things that they enjoy. You know, what are their pastimes? What do they see as entertainment? I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Corey, what kind of... I mean, obviously, Jacob, I think, kind of... Jacob was the one who kind of originally had the idea and said, hey, guys, I really want to do this. But what got you to the point where you said, yeah, I'd be in on that. I'd enjoy doing that?
I never actually thought about doing my own podcast until Jake brought it up. But I'd always thought it would be cool to like talk about, my hobbies, mostly sports and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then Jake brought this idea up of everyone just kind of talking about, anything that's not their day job. And it was like, yeah, I could see myself doing that because that's what I wanted to do, was talk about sports and whatnot. And I don't get to do it for a whole show, but that's really not the point because I have other hobbies than just sports.
Yeah.
And it's cool to hear what you guys have to say. And also, just not even podcast-wise, but just getting together as family and hanging out is really fun too. So
Yeah,
that's what's kind of got me drawn into it.
I think the thing that made it so easy was, when Jacob had the idea of like, hey, I'd really like to do this, it was really easy to just see. There's already been so many times where me and Jacob go see a movie and then spend an hour to an hour and a half in the car when I'm dropping him off back at home.
Yeah.
What movie? I feel like we saw Solo together. There's been a lot of movies that we've seen together.
Yeah,
but
Solo, War for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, those were
Dunkirk.
two that... Yeah, Dunkirk
Dunkirk,
too.
we saw the three of us together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those three movies kind of stand out to me because we would spend an hour to an hour and a half in the car just talking about the movie and what we liked and how so it was very easy to see there just being a microphone now in front of us and having those same conversations. So it wasn't a leap to get to a podcast. I felt like we already had those conversations already. So yeah, it was kind of a simple, easy transition. So it was kind of a might as well
Record it.
Yeah, might as well record
why
it.
not just put our conversations to tape? I'm going to kind of piggyback off what you were saying. I'm going to emphasize this point, that it's just a great avenue for us to just express what we're passionate about, and most importantly, just get together, because it's our lives are so busy. It's hard for us to get together and hang out and talk about things that we love. And, life, you can get pretty overwhelmed with the day job and other responsibilities. The three of us have wives and families, and, life is busy. It's kind of nice to set time aside and just, talk about things that aren't like the most important things in your life, just the things that are your distractions, and these are things that we can be passionate about and have fun conversations with. And that's what stories in general, like stories, movies, comics, games, even sports, they're meant to be distractions from the things that may be overwhelming from time to time. And it's fun to have passionate, fun conversations with people you enjoy hanging out with about these types of things. And sometimes when you're at the day job, you can't have a lot of time to talk about it,
Yeah, and I think that was kind of going to be my next question, or my next talking point, was kind of what's been our favorite thing about podcasting. But I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's kind of just been, for me at least, it's just been being able to get together, have an excuse to get together. Corey, have you had anything in particular that...
Not really, but just I think it's cool to kind of like what Jake was saying, just like it's a break from your daily life. You know, you don't like, this is just a time to talk about what you find fun and what you find exciting. And some people don't like sports as much as I do, and I know people don't like maybe Star Wars as much as Jake does, but it's like we all can come here and talk about what we like and
Try to find common ground.
right.
On it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point, is finding the common ground. Like, what is it about sports or Star Wars or Marvel or technology
Yeah.
or whatever that you're passionate about? And to
Or
try
why
and
didn't you like this movie? Or why did you like this movie? Why don't you like this song? Yeah, stuff like that.
exactly try and see things from the other person's point of view, and that leads to a better conversation rather than being so narrow-minded that, you know, if you don't like what I like, then you're dumb. You know,
Right.
which seems to be kind of the mindset of the internet.
Yeah.
This
I
day
just
and
don't
age.
like it because it's just terrible.
Yeah, with no
Yeah.
real like explanation as to why, and not giving another person an opportunity to express themselves. And that's what this place is here for. You know, we're not here to validate each other's opinions. We're here to
Say you're wrong.
yeah, right. We're just here to let you know you're wrong. If you don't agree with us, you're wrong and dumb. No, we're here to. It's an open platform to be passionate and expressive about the things that you enjoy, and us as the hosts of this show will try and see the other person's point of view, and maybe by doing so we'll appreciate the thing that the other person loves more, and then we can engage in a more meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and I think more so because as soon as you said that, I started thinking about we've thrown around the idea of having guests on the show because it's something that I think we all agree we'd like to do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As this show moves along, and there's been a few guests that we've thought of or have come up to us and said, hey, I think it'd be so much fun like to sit down with you guys and talk about such and such. And I think me and Jacob have talked about it and gone, I don't think any of us know anything about that or really care about that, but I think that'd be fun. Like, that would be
Yeah.
a fun topic.
Yeah, I could ask tons of questions about this thing, though,
Yeah.
because I know nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then by learning more about it, I may not love, sculpting,
But
clay
we understand
sculpting.
why they do.
Yeah, I want to.
Underwater basket weaving, but
Right,
hey,
like I may never get into it, but I want to understand why this person loves it and talk to them about it. It's their
if
passion.
it's not their day job, as long as it's not their day job.
Exactly. This is the perfect platform for something like that.
Which I don't know if that is a job, underwater basket weaving.
If you are an underwater basket weaver, you can hit us up on Twitter or email us at notthedayjobpod on Gmail.
And
We'd
tell us
love
we're
to
wrong.
have.
It
No,
seems
no,
like
we'd
too
love
much
to have you
work
on
to not get paid for it.
But why would you do it underwater?
That's what I'm saying.
for the challenge.
For
Probably
the,
good aerobics or something.
Sure.
I don't know. There's a retirement home somewhere that's like,
these youngins
don't know nothing. Someone send them a letter.
I'm just gonna go weave my baskets above ground. All right.
I never said they were doing it underground. I just said underwater.
If
But
you're underwater, you're below the ground.
oh boy, unless it's an above ground. No, I'm just kidding.
That's
too
fair.
far.
That's fair.
Sorry.
All right.
I think too, though, that like this is the most that we have got together the past few months than we have in a long time.
Consistently, definitely.
Long time.
Long
I stole
time.
it from you. Nope, can't do it anymore.
So that's like I think that's like the main thing for me. It's just hanging out.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of
because it turns into an excuse of like, hey, tonight's podcasting night. Like, where normally, like, if you were to tell,
Hey, I'm going to Buffalo Wild Wings.
we're gonna exactly, we're gonna
Uh-huh.
go watch the game. It's like, really? You're gonna go spend money and watch the game, and I'm gonna sit it, and it's like, but at least with this, it's like, babe, it's podcasting night. It's like, oh, okay, yep, have fun.
yeah. It's just I don't know. It's
The
fun
other
for
two
me.
are treading lightly. My wife is the only one that's not here.
Oh no. No, I mean I think it's awesome that we have this chance for the three of us to get together, because before we all, started our own families, we used to spend a lot of time together, and this is a good excuse to try and get together at least once a week to just hang out and
Yeah.
I don't know, catch up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's funny because me and Jacob see each other twice a week,
At least, yeah.
at least. But, like, that's about it. we see each other.
Yeah, it's kind of in passing.
Yeah. So it's kind of nice to be able to actually sit down and chat and, not have to just in passing, say, hey, bud, I'll see you later. All right, bye.
Yeah.
It's nice to have time set aside.
And I live in a different state.
Yeah, you're a goner.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But no, it's been really nice to be able to, even if, like we've said before, even if nothing comes of this podcast, I think we're totally fine with that. It's been fun just to be able to sit and chat together.
Yeah, I mean, the very name of this show lets you know what our mindset is going into it. It's not the day job. We're not looking to make a profit off of this show. If we maintain a listenership of only our friends and family, that's cool. It's just, for us, it's a fun hobby. And I guess we're just really hitting the hammer right on the top of the nail that this is just a fun hobby excuse for us to get together and hang out. Yeah.
What do you guys, Jacob, what do you think's been the hardest thing about this podcast?
Consistency.
Yeah.
I mean, our lives, the three of us, scheduling is really tough. Like, we've tried a couple different nights of the week to see what works best. And, sometimes, frankly, it just didn't work out. That's why we went the majority of December without a show. I mean, you guys were out of state. We tried to get a couple episodes banked, and again, scheduling just didn't work. For me, that seems to be the hardest thing is consistency.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that subject matter, things to talk about, is easy.
Super easy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
we could talk for hours, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just did 1 hour and a half, and it seemed like we could have kept going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Corey, what do you think has been the hardest? Something that you thought, that podcasting, this will be easy. What's something that you've had trouble with or have found challenging?
Nothing's been really too challenging except for, like Jake said, finding the time to that we're finding the time that all three of us can get together at the same time.
Yeah.
But other than that, everything's, like you said before, we've already been doing this, is talking about the topics that we talk about. And so it's not hard to come up with material or anything. So it's all been pretty easy. But what would you say is the hardest thing for you?
I don't know. I think all of us have it's been getting used to, for as much as we say, it's our normal conversation, just putting a mic in front of it. That's not entirely true, right?
It is a little awkward at first, yeah.
You want it to flow. You don't want to say anything that somebody could find offensive or, you want to make sure you say everything
it's
right.
It's hard. You know what it is? It's hard to, you made me think of something. It's hard to if Jake's talking about a subject or you're talking about a subject, to not say, myself, not say something that stops you guys.
Yeah.
That's like a conversation stopper that I say
right.
Or I butt in somehow and it's now Jake just lost his thought and then now the whole podcast is
literally
awry.
while I was just saying that sentence. No.
Right.
No, that was a good example. Even though it was adding to the conversation, that was a slight derailment.
Because I have no idea what I was talking
where he was going to.
about.
But see, that's the thing that you gotta overcome is it's finding points of interrupting one another, I guess you would say, but that build upon the point of what the person's talking about.
Right.
And trying to build that chemistry to see where that person's going.
Yeah.
Rather than I have an idea that's going to take it in this completely different direction. And there's no problem with these tangents and sidetracks because sometimes those are the most fun conversations. But keeping on track sometimes I've felt has been pretty challenging too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the only real thing that I've that and scheduling has probably been the two that I've just taken some getting used to. Other than that, do you see anything that's been challenging? I don't think so. No. So Jacob, other than Star Wars Minute, because I know that was kind of the inspiration. Was there anything else that was kind of the inspiration behind you getting into this?
I know that I've already touched on it, but about just finding a platform to talk about things that you're passionate about, but using podcasting because it's kind of a different medium than YouTube. It's kind of a more simple setup. All you need is a recording device and a microphone.
Yeah.
And a loose game plan, and you can make it happen. But I was inspired by Star Wars Minute, and to see like that sounds ridiculous to talk about each individual minute of Star Wars, but then listening to the entire first season and like, wow, it worked.
Yeah.
You can literally talk about anything, and there's an audience out there somewhere, big or small. So that was kind of like, well, if these guys can do it and be successful, I can too. And it took me a long time to finally work it up and get you guys on board with it to make it happen.
I think 2018 was kind of like, it was the year of the podcast too.
Yeah.
Everyone has a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of caught on fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so.
We were on the tail end of it.
It kind of became more of like a popular thing. And it was like, you know, before a podcast, it was like reserved. It felt like for like NPR or PBS.
Yeah,
Like that's what most...
I always said, I was like, man, I hate podcasts. People ask me, you know, if I listen to it and whatnot. Like, I hate them. They're so boring. And that's all I knew was, like Garett said, like NPR podcasts and like just other weird stuff that probably most people liked, but I didn't because it was just boring. And
there's a lot of people that like that, and that's totally fine. It was just I never found a podcast that I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. Jacob, what do you see the future of this podcast being?
Well, the future of the podcast definitely is a consistent, at least one episode a week. If the main episode goes long, you know, where we talk about what's good with each other, we'll try and break out and do the main topic like we're doing tonight on a separate episode. I eventually want to get into doing movie reviews, because movies are one of my favorite mediums of art and entertainment. I love movies. So, you know, just a couple of different avenues for us to kind of like branch out, to kind of separate it from the main show.
right.
I don't know. What about you guys? Are there any like goals that you have for the show that you would like, ideas that you want to incorporate? Or
I love the movie reviews. I think we're going to make that a big part of the podcast this year.
yeah,
I personally would like to do more interviews with people, talking about, you know, just their perspective on their hobbies and stuff that they like, their stuff that's not the day job, you know,
definitely.
and just get their, you know, even on movies and stuff, like what do they think about a movie, and not just us three, but just interview more people, get to know more people, and, you know, talk about stuff that's just kind of that we, like you were saying earlier, that we don't have any idea what maybe their hobby is.
Yeah.
But it can help us understand what it is and why they like it so much.
Yeah, exactly.
So that'll be cool to see. So hopefully we can get some more people on the schedule to come on the show.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Corey. That's kind of always been the fun thing that I've been looking forward to, is interviewing some people, because I think we have some people in mind that we all think like, oh, that'd be really fun to interview so and so, because we know they have some obscure hobby, or, you know,
An interesting story to tell.
Yeah.
to tell. So yeah, I think that's kind of the thing I've been looking forward to most, that I know for a fact we'll get into more in 2019.
Yeah. And I know that, like, odds are, and this is very pessimistic, but we're not going to build a very large listenership, but I want to try and start a community on either, you know, the people who follow us on Twitter or on our Facebook page, but like a community that talks positively and encourages one another about the things that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be
All 5 of them.
yeah, all 5 of you. I want you to really feel like,
Yeah.
I want it
Are
to
you
be
listening, Danielle, Micah?
like I want it to be like a safe place for people to like really say, "Hey, I loved this movie and this is why." Not having people jumping in saying, "Oh, you love that movie? Well, you're dumb for liking it because
Yeah.
it's a terrible movie for this reason, and this reason," and tearing each other down. Like, there are
ask
so
why.
many corners of the internet that do that, and I just think it doesn't
I don't even
build.
think it's corners of the internet anymore.
Yeah,
it's the forefront of
it's
the
a pretty
internet.
broad stroke.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a safe, fun place to talk about the things you are passionate about in any avenue of
Your life.
of art or your life
Yeah.
in anything. So eventually I'd like our Facebook page to be a place where people can start these posts like, hey, what'd you guys think about this particular movie? And just blah, 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 blah. Hey, I started picking up this hobby. This is what I do. This is what I love about it. And then start a thread where people like ask questions and
Above ground pool basket weaving.
above ground pool
Here's
basket
why
weaving.
it's so cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What about you
Um,
guys? Anything else?
I don't think so. I think I wanted to see what your guys' top. We'll go top 3 each, and then we'll have to decide on one to make it a top 10 list. But
Okay.
top 3 Corey podcasts that you listen to that kind of have.
And give us a
Helped you.
brief.
So most of mine, like I said, are sports. The problem that I find with most sports podcasts is it's a bunch of guys talking about sports who haven't played any sports or haven't played professionally.
Yeah.
But they know the stats that they get from.
They know all these stats, but for me, it's like it's not as cool listening to them. And I know I'm a hypocrite because I love talking about sports and I haven't played professionally. But it's like, but
I hate the.
no, it's hard to get their perspective because they haven't even played in a professional game. So one podcast that I love is Pull Up. It's called Pull Up Podcast with CJ McCollum, and he's a guard for the Trailblazers.
All-star guard.
All-star guard, yeah. And so he knows. He's went through it, and he's played. It's like his sixth year, but that's a really cool podcast because not only has he played, but he interviews other players from the NBA, and not only sports players, but famous actors, actresses, a lot of people who are just in the business, and it's a good podcast because of all the experience that he has with basketball. So I really appreciate that one. There's the Ringer NBA show. That one's a good one. That one's there's no one on there who's played sports professionally, but they seem to have a pretty good handle on what the NBA goes through, and they have a good knowledge of stats and whatnot. So it's good to listen to them. They're good too with kind of matchups and standings, just overall like all around news. They put out a podcast every day, whereas the Pull Up Pod with CJ McCollum goes, I think that's just once a week, like every Wednesday, I think it is. They release one.
Okay.
And then for the third one, I'd go. It's not a sports podcast. It's called Art of Manliness podcast, and they have a lot. I know it sounds crazy, but they have a
I
lot
should have expected that.
of different subjects on there. Pretty,
Yeah.
like kind of what we do almost, like just kind of everything. Like a couple of them recently have been about breaking habits, building habits. They have a lot of stuff about history. They have a lot of
fire.
what's that?
How to build a fire? Isn't that one of the episodes?
No, it's build a snowman.
Oh,
Yeah, it goes everywhere though. So that one's really cool because it's just a ton of different life experiences that it talks about.
Very cool.
very cool. Jacob,
Oh, going to me.
I'll go. Yeah, that's fine.
No, I'm primed. So, one that I really got into early on, it's called the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith. This podcast, this fellow, he gets together with screenwriters and directors at least once a week, and he interviews them about a specific movie that they wrote, and he just asks them about the creative process that they go through when it comes to writing a movie or directing a movie. And it's really neat to hear it directly from the person who had a hand in making a movie and seeing, what process they go through to help create this thing. I mean, this guy is really smart. He goes to a film school, and so he knows the right questions to ask to kind of keep the conversation going. But it's, I don't know, really, really great to hear it from this other point of view.
Bitey.
Another one that I listen to is the Empire Film podcast, and I think we talked about that on the previous show earlier this week. That it's a podcast where they do also interviews with directors and screenwriters.
Those were the ones that had the article about The Quiet Place too, right?
Yeah. So Empire Film Podcast, they're based in the United Kingdom, and the podcast usually has the same 3 or 4 hosts. And again, it's just
just in itself is worth a listen.
Oh yeah,
Listen to 3 British people talk.
Yeah, it's a fun listen. They go pretty in depth. Most episodes, like I said, they have an interview with either a screenwriter, director, or an actor from the movie that they're reviewing. Like recently, the one I listened to, it was back a couple of months ago, but they interviewed Rami Malek from Bohemian Rhapsody, and he kind of gave like his perspective of playing the role, and it was a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah, they have some pretty A-list guests on that show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like
you sent me one clip before we watched Mowgli, before it was released on Netflix, with
Andy Serkis.
Yeah, it was a good interview.
Yeah. So that's a great podcast. Again, like it's centered around movies. I love movies. But then number 3 for me it's this podcast called Obsessed with Joseph Scrimshaw. He's a comedian that lives down in Los Angeles. And his podcast is kind of similar to what we were shooting for later down the road, but he interviews friends of his and guests about what they are obsessed with. And he comes up with all these fun questions to ask them to really understand their obsession, whether it's a video game or a book or a specific lifestyle or whatever. Anyway, it's a really fun listen. Garrett, what are your 3?
I think the first podcast that I really got into was called Stuff You Should Know.
Mm-hmm.
By How it's a How Stuff Works. These guys worked for and wrote for How Stuff Works. Then they created their podcast. I want to say they started 10 years ago. They've been around forever.
Doing podcasts for 10 years?
Doing podcasts for 10 years. And like somehow, it's the most random topics. But somehow you like start one, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm like going to really get into this.
Uh-huh.
But then they start telling you things and you're like, oh wow, like,
yeah,
that's where a safety pin came. Like they tell, like, it's just random topics. And it kind of just teaches you, some random something about like a couple of their episodes were like unique snowflakes, where daylight savings comes from. It can be about, they literally have one on safety pins,
Yeah.
Are they random?
Pretty short episodes?
They vary. They have short episodes, and then they had like one on Pompeii that was like a 2-part, 2-hour episode. So no, they usually, I want to say they usually range in the 42 hour.
Okay, wow.
Hours slot. But so that one was kind of the first one that I got into, and I listened to that one a lot. Great podcast that I like listening to. The other one, I kind of have to go with Corey. It's a radio show that's also on like TV. But the Dan Patrick Show, I usually listen to that a lot.
Good. Yeah.
He worked at Sports Center for years, and then he's got the voice. Yeah, he does. He literally left Sports Center because I forget why he left Sports Center, but like started a radio show in his attic with like 4 other guys. So it's kind of like, it kind of gives me a not the day job feel, but yeah, so I usually listen to that, and listening to that also kind of, when Jacob approached me about doing this, and we were like, man, like 45 minutes, like hour and a half, like
it sounds daunting.
It's like, really? Like, who's
like
gonna
no
listen
problem,
to that?
though.
But then at the same time, I was like, the Dan Patrick Show is 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And I listen to all 3 hours of it.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, no, people do.
Yeah.
People definitely listen to it.
Yeah.
He's an
so
icon, though, Dan Patrick. He's got just that radio voice.
Yeah, it's a killer voice. One that I just recently got into, and I don't know why. Okay, no, I do know why. So at the end of 2018, on Apple Podcasts, they released a list of like the top podcasts from 2018. And there was a few podcasts that you're like, oh yeah, well, of course they're up, up at the top. But then they had like a section that was like newest, what would that be called? Like new podcasts of 2018 that
New
like did
releases
the
or
best.
something? Oh.
That
Up and
like
coming?
up and coming.
Yeah.
And there was this one called the RFK tapes. And I've always I listen to stuff you should know. Like I like listening to history and learning about stuff. So I was like, oh, I'll listen to the RFK tapes. And I don't know why I didn't think about it. And I totally forgot the whole RFK story. And it was like super conspiracy theory. And we talked about this on our first episode?
No, this was an episode. It was one of our pre-pilot episodes that we
that's
didn't release.
right.
Yeah.
So we had talked in like a practice run.
Yeah.
And the question came up about conspiracy theories.
Yep.
And I had mentioned that I'm not into conspiracy theories. I couldn't tell you like more than 2 conspiracy theories. And Corey was like, oh, what? You don't know? And I was like, no, I just don't. And I started listening to this RFK tapes. And again, not a conspiracy theorist whatsoever. And was like, oh my gosh, like next episode, I need to and it's all.
Once you hear one, they just won't stop coming either. It's like,
go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
No, and you do, because it was like, it's the...
They lied to me about this. They're going to lie to me about that.
It's the tapes that got released by the LA Police Department from the investigation into the assassination of RFK. So it's literally the tapes, and you listen to it, and the guy explain. And I don't know. I don't know why it's the one time that I've been like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I was like, I sent it to Corey and was like, I know you're going to be into this. But no, that's kind of been my... And after that, I haven't been listening to any more conspiracy theorists podcasts. But new and noteworthy. That's where it came from. Thanks, Danielle. Getting text messages from my sister saying, hey, idiot, it's not up
awesome.
and coming. No, she didn't say that.
New
and noteworthy. That's what we were
noteworthy.
looking for.
I can't wait to.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes here. We have a full team of fact checkers.
Don't pull back the curtain, man.
No, we really don't.
We know
That's why
all
half
this.
the stuff that we say is wrong.
Yeah,
and being looked up on Google as we speak.
No. All of this stuff we know off the top of our heads.
We sure do.
Yeah. There's no pausing. There's no editing.
Straight one cut.
Yeah. Every
Recorded.
time.
Yep.
Every time.
Yeah, we don't laugh about anything.
No, we're very
Go off
serious.
the rails. Yep. All right, so that's 9.
Yeah. So
and I know, Jacob, you had a podcast which we've already talked about, but you want
so
that's your number one.
Yeah, the number one podcast I would have to say that is the main inspiration to this show. Again, it's Star Wars Minute. The first podcast I listened to, it was kind of what got me onto the idea of just getting together with buddies and talking about what you love. So it's your father-in-law's fault that this crazy little hobby became a reality. Is because of he shared this podcast with me, and I said, hey, I want to start my own podcast with my brothers and have a good time doing this thing and talking about the things that we love talking about. So I think that should wrap it up for this episode tonight. You guys have any other closing thoughts or that final plug for that absolute favorite podcast from you, if you wanted to?
I would say I'm just looking forward to what we got next, seeing who we interview this year and whatnot. And, I would just say shout out to CJ McCollum for that awesome podcast he's got. Pull Up Pod.
Yeah, it's loaded in the chamber right now, but we want to bring our not the day job artist on and have a fun episode interview with Maisie.
That would be fun.
So that's on the back burner, but coming up quick. Garrett, you got any closing thoughts?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, that's fair enough. Let me give you guys the business, and then we will call it a day. You know this, that you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Not The Day Job Pod. You can also email us at notthedayjobpod@gmail.com. You can send us the questions that we like to talk about at the end of our every main show, and that helps you be part of the show. You know, we'll take your questions. Sometimes we may even make one of your questions an entire topic that we have a whole episode on. You never know. Our episodes can be downloaded from iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. We also broadcast the audio only on YouTube, and you can find the entire catalog and all of the proper links to all these other places on the Podbean app or at www.notthedayjob.podbean.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you all. I guess we won't see you. I'll see the two of you, but I won't see the people listening. I'll see some of the people listening. I'm rambling. Guys, Not the Day Job Squad.
Punching out.
Punching out. You'll get there someday.